Joining us now, Jamal Simmons. He's a Democratic strategist and syndicated columnist, Larry Elder. Let me start with you, Larry. What do you think? The president's remarks, you've heard them. Do you think this now puts this whole controversy to rest?
I suspect it's probably got another day or two shelf life. I could be wrong because there may be a civil lawsuit down the road which would kick this back up again. But at the end of the president's press conference, he made a comment that was over the line. He first said that Gates is a friend of mine. I don't have all the facts. So far, so good. And then he proceeded to say that the police acted stupidly and that you can't arrest somebody in their own home without at all talking about the horrific things that Gates said to this officer that precipitated the arrest. That said, today he used the same verb, Wolf, that I used in a column I recently wrote. Don't worry, I'm not going to go after anybody for plagiarism, and that is overreaction. Cops are trained at the academy to take abuse, F words, S words, comments about your mother, which is what Gates allegedly made towards this officer, and you're trained to walk away from that. So I don't believe that he should have been arrested. At most, maybe a report could have been filed to a prosecutor, and the prosecutor might have investigated and maybe might have filed charges, but you walk away from that. You're trained to deal with that kind of abuse.
All right, let me let Jamal, you were shaking your head when Larry was speaking, but go ahead and weigh in on that specific point that the president originally said, you know what, I don't have all the facts, but then he went on to say the police acted stupidly.
I think the president stepped up and said something that a lot of African Americans were thinking, which is that for an African American middle-aged man who walks with a cane to be in his home and to be arrested, regardless of what he said, I talked to lawyers about this, it doesn't matter if you're belligerent in your home, as long as you're not threatening, that you can say whatever you want. That's not an arrestable offense. So I can't help but think what would have happened if someone like our friend David Gergen, who's also a professor at Harvard, if this had happened to him, whether or not there would not be some outrage that he was arrested out of his home because he spoke illy to a police officer when he thought that he was breaking into his home and he was not. Whether it was that or another situation. And I've been on the wrong end of that situation in my own life, and I think that this is something that a lot of African Americans would prefer we have a more serious conversation about, maybe get out of the context of this particular instance, but we've got to figure out how to get police officers in the black community on a better page.
Larry, have you ever been racially profiled?
Have I ever been stopped? Have I ever been stopped possibly because I am black in a neighborhood where it is unlikely that there is a black person? Yes. But whenever I have been stopped by the police, and by the way, I've been stopped only a few days ago, not far from my house. I live in a nice neighborhood. I drive a nice car. I rolled through a stop sign. It was a police officer, I believe, of Hispanic descent. I was polite. He was polite. He found out I lived near the neighborhood. He told me he was looking for people who had been breaking in homes in the neighborhood, not for people who are residents, and he let me go. Politeness begets politeness. What bothers me more about what the president said, not only basically siding with Professor Gates, Wolf, is that he implied that there was a racial motive behind this without any evidence whatsoever. One of the reasons, I believe, that Barack Obama was elected president is that many of us wanted to get beyond racism. He had an opportunity. He called it a teachable moment later, but then he had an opportunity to say, look, everything ought to be judged on a case-by-case basis. Just because it's a white officer and a black civilian doesn't necessarily mean there's racial animus or there's a racial motive behind this. Don't stereotype blacks police officers, but blacks don't stereotype officers. Obama could have said that and didn't.
And the president now, Jamal, does say that he knows the officer, Sergeant Crowley, is an outstanding officer, has actually invited him and Professor Gates to come to the White House for a beer and to talk about all of this. He seems, the president of the United States, regretful that he sort of inflamed this whole uproar.
Well, the political strategist in me says that he probably did the right thing for the body politic or for his particular political situation, and probably he's personal. I'm sure he did what he thought was right. The black man in me who got pulled over when I was 19 or 20 years old, driving in Michigan with 3 friends because a woman inside of a convenience store thought we had bulges in our jackets, and the cop came up and stopped us when we got back on the highway, even though she didn't claim that we stole anything, but just that we had bulges in our jackets and we had to answer questions on the side of a highway in the middle of the night. That person in me wishes that he wouldn't have had to say what he said today. And so I think I would prefer that, you know, when we talk about the situation, you think about what it would be like if we had the situation reversed and it was a white professor, a black police officer who arrested him in his home because he thought that he was breaking in. I think right-wing radio would be going off the charts, saying that here was a man's home that was violated, and most lawyers will tell you in your home you have a lot of rights to protect your home. Here's a man who was taken out of his home by jackbooted thugs. I think the right-wing, I'm not saying this cop was, but the right-wing radio hosts would be going nuts about this kind of thing.
All right.
But here today, we're not.
Very quickly, because we got to go, Larry, is this a good debate that the country is having right now?
Well, again, had Obama handled it the way I suggested it, which is let's deal with this now on a case-by-case basis. This is not your grandfather's country. Gates lives in a city with a black female mayor, in a state with a black governor, and in a country with a black president. It is not the same as it used to be. The police department is not the same as they were 50 or 100 years ago, and we ought to deal with these things on a case-by-case basis.
Well, Larry,
and not jump to conclusions.
Larry,
I'm not 50.
Larry, I'm not 50 or 100 years old, but I also will say this, that it is possible for things to be better socially and politically and to still be bad legally.
Well, I don't know what to tell you other than the fact is that we need the police. The police are the line between us and the bad guys. And I don't know what kind of neighborhood Gates lives in, but I grew up in South Central, and a disproportionate percentage of the crime is done by black people against other black people. So to have this hostile attitude towards the police from the black community that is generated quite often by irresponsible so-called civil rights leaders, I think does not serve the country well.
All right, guys, we're not going to end this debate, but the debate certainly will continue. Jamal Simmons, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Larry Elder, thanks to you as well.